let's say that you wanted to build a better, I'll give you an example of breaking a good habit or building a good habit and breaking a bad one. So one of the laws is to make it obvious. And this largely comes down to like what we're exposed to each day. And minimalism and simplicity plays a big role in this. In the book, I call it environment design. That's basically the strategy. So for a long time, I realized that I brushed my teeth twice a day, but I didn't floss consistently. And when I looked at that habit, one of the reasons that I wasn't flossing consistently is because the floss was hidden in the drawer in the bathroom. So I just wouldn't see it, like I wouldn't open up the drawer and remember. So I bought a little bowl and got some of the pre-made flossers and put them in the bowl and placed it right next to my toothbrush. So now I brush my teeth, put the toothbrush down, pick the flosser up, it's right there. Just that one little environment design change is pretty much all I needed to do to build the habit of flossing every day. On the other side, let's say, a lot of people feel like they spend too much time watching TV or playing video games or just looking at a screen. But if you walk into pretty much any living room, where do all the couches and chairs face? They all face the television. So it's like, what is that room designed to get you to do? It's designed to get you to watch TV. So there are a variety of levels to this. You could, for example, take the remote and take it off of the coffee table and put it inside a drawer. Or you could take the television and put it inside like a wall unit or a cabinet so that you don't see it. You could also increase the friction of the task. So you could like take the batteries out of the remote after each use, and then, it's an extra 5 or 10 seconds, put it in. Maybe that's just enough time for you to think, do I really want to watch something, or am I just doing this mindlessly? You could unplug the TV after each individual use and then only plug it in if you can say the name of the show you want to watch. So you can't like mindlessly browse on Netflix. And I mean, if you really wanted to be extreme about it, you could take the TV off the wall, put it in the closet, and then only take it out when you really wanted to watch something. But the point here, and this is kind of the principle of environment design in general, which is you want to put fewer steps between you and the good behaviors and more steps between you and the bad ones. And imagine the cumulative impact of living in an environment that exposes you to the cues of your positive habits and reduces the cues of your negative habits. It's kind of like you're just gently being nudged in the right direction each day. And that's just one of the ways that you can sort of design a system that leads you into better habits.
Need motivation?
Watch the top 10 we believe nation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men. All my life, like 9 and 9. For my top 10, top 10, 9 and 9. This one's for my top 10.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more. And you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, James Clear, and my take on his top 10 rules for success. Enjoy. Rule number 2, don't get trapped in motion.
Just take someone who's trying to get in shape. I mean, people will... What kind of protein powder should I get? What knee sleeves do I need? What are the best weightlifting shoes? And all that stuff is like the last 2% of difference. It's mostly like, don't miss workouts and get your reps in. This is what in the book I call the difference between motion and action. Action can actually deliver a result, but motion is related to that, but never will. Like going to the gym and talking to a personal trainer about signing up. That's fine. That's related to getting in shape, but it doesn't matter how many times you talk to a personal trainer, you're never going to get in shape. Whereas like doing 10 squats, that actually can do something. It's like talking to the trainer is motion, doing squats is action. I think a lot of times people get trapped in motion. They get trapped in analysis paralysis because it is a way to feel like you're making progress without running the risk of failure.
Rule number 3, avoid distraction.
Every day I try to leave my phone in another room outside of my office, at least until lunch, because then I get like a 4-hour block of time in the morning where I can just work without any distraction. Yeah. And it's funny how quickly you don't, like, if my phone was on me in the morning, I would check it like, every 5 minutes or whatever. But when it's out of the room, I don't even find myself wanting to, I never walk up the stairs to go check it, even though it's only 30 seconds away. Wow. So it's interesting how little we actually want to do these things, but we just do them all the time because they're obvious and easy. And I think the key is to invert that. Take the things that are the bad habits, the distractions, the procrastinations, the unproductive uses of time, and make them more invisible, reduce exposure, and less easy to do. and take the things that are good habits and make it the equivalent of having your phone on you all the time, right? Make it right in front of you, make it obvious, make it easy, make it, frictionless.
Rule number 4, build one habit at a time.
What really changes your outcomes, or what really moves your life in a positive direction, is not a single 1% change or a single little habit. It's a collection of them all organized towards the same overall goal or overall outcome. So sometimes people they get a Fitbit and they get a Fitbit and they start walking 10,000 steps a day or something like that. And then they get frustrated after 3 months because they haven't seen this change in the mirror or this change on the scale or whatever. But it's well, that's good, but that's just one habit related to your health. You don't need a single little habit. You need 1,000 of them. And once you kind of build this collection of them all moving you in the same direction, it's kind of like each one adds a little grain of sand to the side of the scale, and eventually you tip the scales in your favor. And I think that's another reason to start with one habit at a time, is that you naturally sort of pick up other behaviors that are related to the overall thing that you're working on in the moment. And that helps keep you focused rather than trying to do 2 or 3 things and then you get scattered.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there. Rule number 5, create satisfaction.
We interpret the stimuli and the data, the cues in our life differently based on what our viewpoint is at that time, based on what our personality or our personal viewpoint is, based on what you believe, your self-image. So, you see this all the time with politics. You have the same news story that runs on the TV, but then a liberal and a conservative interpret that data in completely different ways. And it's because of what's getting echoed back to them, because of how they see themselves, because of what filter they're running that data through. And the same thing is true if we're talking about weight loss or whatever else. If you see a particular number on the scale and the thing that's being echoed back to you is, I want to lose 20 pounds and feel great, then suddenly you don't feel good about that number. If the thing that's getting echoed back to you is, I've stuck to workouts for 7 days in a row and I feel more energetic and healthy, then you see the number in a totally different way. Same number, just different interpretation. So I think it's important, but it's not the whole story. And some of the things that also influence things are, like what we talked about, making things obvious and making them easy. But making it satisfying, which is the 4th kind of major lever that I talk about in the book, that's crucial for getting people to come back. And that can come in many different forms. So I guess I'll just lay the context for this real quick. This is really interesting to look at with a lot of products. So chewing gum is a good example. For many years, for hundreds of years, chewing gum was around, but it was kind of this bland resin. It was just chewy, but it wasn't tasty. And Wrigley launched in 1880, 1890, and they came out with Juicy Fruit and Spearmint and Double Mint. And suddenly gum was chewy and it had this immediate flavor. There was this immediate reward to chewing it. And it took off. They became the biggest chewing gum company in the world. And today, many companies are doing the same kind of thing where they're trying to layer in a little bit of extra satisfaction with the product. So a couple of years ago, BMW came out with a car that when you press on the accelerator, it'll pipe extra engine growl through the stereo in the car. So it's more satisfying to step on the gas. Ford just came up with another one where the engine noise is still there, but they have this valve that it'll only open and let the engine noise into the car interior and past all the soundproofing if you really slam on the gas and rev the RPMs up. But if you just drive like normal, it'll keep it soft and quiet. And so the point there is that all of those products, cars or chewing gum and many others, they find ways to layer immediate satisfaction into the experience. And when you do that, people want to repeat it more. Anytime you have some kind of enjoyment or a satisfying ending to a behavior, it's like this positive signal in your brain that says, hey, that felt good. You should do this again next time. And that's what really gets a habit to stick. All the other stuff that we talked about, making habits attractive, making them more obvious, making it more convenient to do. That gets a habit to start the first time or makes it easier for you to do it right then. But the only reason you come back to it is because it's satisfying. And it's really about the speed of the satisfaction. And this is something that I call the cardinal rule of behavior change, which is behaviors that are immediately rewarded get repeated, and behaviors that are immediately punished get avoided. And the more that you can have that positive emotional feeling right away, the more reason you have to come back to a habit in the future.
Rule number 6, embody progress.
If you were coaching someone who said, I have no clue what I'm supposed to do with my life. I'm lost. I have all these bad habits. I smoke, I drink, I eat donuts every day. I have no job. My room is sloppy. And I'm just depressed. What would you say to them to get started with changing their life around in the form of better habits?
Well, you just need to pick one thing, first of all. I think that I just mentioned a few minutes ago, one of the most powerful forms of motivation is progress. So seeing some progress, I mean, it could be as simple as make your bed each day, right? But just doing that, embodying the identity of someone who's getting better, who's making progress, just pick one thing and use that as, this is true. I mean, Lewis, this is something you've probably seen with a lot of people that you've talked to, but habits are the foundation for mastery. So if you say take a sport like basketball, you need to be able to dribble with both hands without thinking before you can worry about what strategy you're running on offense or what kind of strategic play you're going to run or what your defensive scheme is or all this other stuff, right? Like you need to automate the fundamentals of the craft before you can worry about the next level of performance. Same thing is true for chess. Like you need to know how the chess pieces move automatically without thinking about it before you can get into, all right, what is my opponent going to do? And then I'm going to do this and they're going to do that. And so I think this is true not just at the peak levels of performance, that you integrate these habits and use habits as the foundation for the next level of performance, but also true when you're getting started. Just build one small thing, carve out a 1% change, a 1% improvement, and use that as a stepping stone to the next level.
Rule number 7, align goals with identity.
True behavior change is really identity change because you're not really looking to go from the type of person who doesn't run to the type of person who can run a 5K. That's fine. That's good. It's the outcome. But the goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. The goal is not to write a book. The goal is to become a writer. And once you identify as that type of person, in a sense, you're not even really pursuing behavior change anymore. You're just acting in alignment with the type of person that you already believe that you are. Right. It's like one thing to say, I want this. It's something different to say, I am this.
Rule number 8, make decisive moments.
In my personal life, like there's a moment around 5:15 each night. My wife gets home from work and either we change into our workout clothes and we go to the gym, or we don't change into our workout clothes and we watch, reruns of The Office and order takeout or whatever. And really the next 2 hours are kind of determined by that decisive moment of whether we change into our workout clothes or not. If we change clothes, then like everything else is going to happen automatically. We're going to drive to the gym. I'll get under the bar. It's already pre-decided basically. So one of the realizations of this, and it comes back to your kind of central question of what are the most important habits to build, or are there ones that ripple into other areas of life? If you can just master maybe 5 or 10 decisive moments throughout the day, these little kind of 2-minute chunks that determine the next block of time, you really only have to focus your attention and energy on that. And the rest of it kind of comes easily. You don't have to do that much if you can master the right moments. It's kind of like judo for your personal habits. You apply the pressure in the right place and everything else kind of falls in line.
Rule number 9, establish a habit.
If your expectations are sky high, like if you set, I have a friend who's a writer and his goal is to write one sentence every day. And it sounds absurd, but if you set the expectation that low, then he can feel successful pretty much every day. He always can feel satisfied by sticking to the habit, which gives him a reason to come back again the next day. And sometimes he writes a full page and sometimes it's just a sentence. But if he had set a goal of writing 1,000 words a day, there would be some days where he couldn't do that. And then suddenly he's feeling bad about that. Like, what if he wrote one sentence that day? He would feel bad about it, even though he still wrote that day, but it's just because of his expectation. So there's a little bit of like mental play that's going on there in how we sabotage ourselves by setting the bar so high. That's especially true in the beginning. I think that it becomes less true for maybe the 1 or 2 areas where you really want to be a master in life. Like if something's really important to you and you want peak performance, you want to be a professional athlete, you want to be, among the best authors or something like that, then maybe your strategy needs to change. But for most people, most of the time, the strategy is probably better to set the bar low, find a way to be satisfied and show up each day. And then once you've built the habit, then you optimize from there. This is, I had a reader who ended up losing over 100 pounds. And one of the things that he did was he went to the gym, but he wasn't allowed to stay for longer than 5 minutes. And so it sounds so weird because it's a complete opposite of what most people do to build a habit. But what he was doing was he was mastering the art of showing up. And so for 6 weeks, he went to the gym, he'd go in, do like half an exercise, and then 5 minutes would be up and he'd go home. And eventually he got to the point where he was like, I'm coming here all the time. I kind of feel like staying longer, right? But that's the opposite of the person who takes the intermediate CrossFit class and like kills themselves for 3 weeks and then it feels totally fried and, gives up. And then 3 months later, they're like, oh, I got to get back in shape. And so a habit must be established before it can be improved. Right? Often we optimize for the finish line. We think about the outcome that we want. We think about like, oh, I want to lose 20 pounds or I want to earn 6 figures this year or whatever the thing is. But instead, if you just focus on the first 2 minutes of a behavior, or in this guy's case, the first 5 minutes of the behavior, and you optimize for the starting line, you master the art of showing up, but then you have options. Then you actually have something that you can improve. If you're not the type of person who shows up at the gym, even if it's just for 5 minutes, it doesn't even matter what your ideal workout plan is or whatever. Like you can't do anything because you're not there. And so in that sense, I think that it's often helpful for people, especially in the beginning, to scale a habit down to the first 2 minutes, master the art of showing up, and then once you're the type of person who does it every day, figure out a way to improve.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is resist temptation.
How much willpower do we have?
So you hear this a lot. I mean, it's very common, especially in self-help, motivation, self-improvement. Yep. You need to be motivated. You have to have willpower. Grit and perseverance are huge and important. And it's not that those qualities are not important. It's just that the way to develop them is different than what most people think. So most people think, I need willpower, so I should just try harder. There's an interesting body of research, I mentioned it in the book, I think it's in chapter 7, on self-control and willpower, which is that the people who appear to have the greatest self-control actually are just tempted the least. So they face temptations less frequently and therefore have the reserves and the resources to resist it when it occasionally comes up. And I think that this is actually like the lever to pull or the pressure point to push on, is that the way to get better willpower is to design an environment that tempts you less, not to say, let me just try harder.
Now I've got a special bonus clip that I think you're gonna enjoy, but before that, it's time for the question of the day. I wanna know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? When you watch a video and just get motivated, the science says you have a 35% chance of actually following through on your goals. That's not good enough. No, not for you, Believe Nation, we gotta do something. But when you write it down and you create a specific plan of action for the next week, that number jumps to 91% chance of you following through. And when you commit to somebody else, like leaving a comment on this video, it jumps to 95%. You need to follow through on your goals. So what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your specific plan of action for the next week? Put it down in the comments below so I can celebrate you.
How do I become the type of person who doesn't miss workouts? And that's another reason I like small habits, because if you have a really busy day and things are crazy and all you can do is 5 push-ups, if you're oriented around the result, around the outcome, it's easy to dismiss that. It's like, well, why would I even bother doing 5 push-ups? It's not going to get me in shape. But some days it's not about the result of the training. Some days it's about reinforcing being that type of person. Like, yes, life was crazy and things are really busy today, and the best I could do was getting 5 push-ups in, but I'm still the type of person who doesn't miss workouts, even when it's not ideal.
Right.
And in the long run, that can count for a lot, which is the kind of twisted thing about small habits, which is that even though they're small, they can still be meaningful. And if they're meaningful, they actually are big. One of the phrases I use, and I have this in the book, is that habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. So it's like the same way that compound interest, accrues through finance, the effects of your habits multiply over time. And so often these choices that you make, they're these little 1% improvements for you or against you each day, and they're very easy to overlook on a daily basis, right? Like, what really is the difference between eating a burger and fries or a salad and chicken for lunch? You don't really see a whole lot. Better. Yeah, right. Yeah.
It tastes amazing in the moment.
That's actually a crucial point that I cover in the book, which is that habits that are immediately satisfying are more likely to be repeated. And so pretty much any behavior produces multiple outcomes across time, right? Like if you eat a donut right now, it's tasty and sugary.
So good.
But in the long run, you gain weight. And so the immediate outcome is favorable. The long-term outcome is unfavorable. With good habits, it's often the reverse, right? Like you go to the gym right now, and it takes effort, you sweat, you have to work hard.
You have to sacrifice your time for Netflix and chill to go train.
The immediate outcome is unfavorable, but the ultimate outcome, you're in shape and in a year or a month or whatever, is favorable. And so the challenge for building good habits and breaking bad ones is often finding a way to pull the long-term consequences of your bad habits into the immediate moment, so you feel a little bit of the pain right now and want to avoid it, and the long-term rewards of your good habits into the immediate moment so that you have a reason to repeat it again in the future. Each behavior casts a vote for the type of person that you want to become. And if you cast enough votes for that type of identity, you start to believe that about yourself, right? Like if you go to church for 20 years, you believe that you're religious. You study Spanish every Tuesday for 30 minutes, you believe that you are studious. So in that way, your habits provide evidence of your desired identity. And I think that is probably the ultimate reason that habits are so important. It's true, like habits can help you earn more money or be more productive or lose weight. And all that stuff is great. But in addition to the external results that habits provide, they also shape your sense of self. They are the engine or the avenue through which you learn to believe things about yourself. Like sometimes people will say stuff like, fake it till you make it. But fake it till you make it is asking yourself to believe something without evidence for it. And you can do that for a little while. You could do it for a day or a week. But eventually, there's a word for beliefs that don't have evidence behind them. It's delusion, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're deluding yourself, then eventually you give up on that. But the power of doing a better habit each day or casting a little vote for that type of person is that now you have evidence to root your belief in.
Yeah, and so now I've done it for 6 months, yeah.
Right? Like, now you have a lot of evidence that you're a podcaster or a good interviewer. Like you do this over and over again. Each time you cast a vote for believing that about yourself. And you aren't delusionally believing that you're a good interviewer. It's because you've shown up and done it hundreds of times.
Right.
And so I think that's true for any habit, large or small, that they provide evidence of the desired identity or the type of person that you are.
There's this professor at the University of Florida. He's retired now. He was a photography professor. His name's Jerry Ulisman. And at the beginning of the semester, he would have this film photography class, and he'd bring the class in, and he would split them into 2 groups. And he said, everybody on this side of the room, you're going to be graded on the quantity of work that you do this semester. And everybody on this side of the room, you're going to be graded on the quality of work that you do this semester. And he further explained it by saying that for your film photography, you're going to be responsible for having 100 pictures. If you do 100 photos over the course of the semester, that'll be an A. If you do 90, it'll be a B. If you do 80, it'll be a C, and so on. So it's quantity. For this group, you only have to produce 1 photo, but it has to be the most perfect photo that you can make, the best photo that you can make. An interesting thing happened. At the end of the term, all the best grades came from the quantity group, not from the quality group. And what ended up happening was that while people were busy experimenting, making mistakes, learning how to play with composition and so on, they would come across a really great photo. And while the quality group was busy theorizing about what perfection would look like and how to take the perfect photo and not actually honing their skills, they ended up only making something mediocre or average. And the important insight here, especially for habits, is that in the beginning, the most important thing is just to shut up and put your reps in. Just make sure that you hone the skill, right? And you can start to think of it, the way that I like to think of it is that any outcome that you wish to achieve is just a point along the spectrum of repetitions. So if you have few reps to more reps, and you can imagine an easy goal, a moderate goal, a hard goal, the more reps that you put in, the more likely you are to achieve that goal. So maybe point A is, let's take fitness, squatting 100 pounds. Point B is squatting 200. Point C is squatting 300. Maybe you need to put in 100 reps or 1,000 reps to get to point A. Maybe it's 5,000 to get to point B. Maybe it's 10,000 to get to point C.
Occasionally, and this is true for everybody, if you live long enough, life will come for you at some point, right? Like something's going to happen. So occasionally life will stress you. But when life doesn't challenge you, I think it's important to challenge yourself, because otherwise you're just living in this optimal environment, air conditioning, and everything else is super easy. You can get all the information in the world at your fingertips. You never have to, like, if you think about how crazy just eating is in the modern world. So previously, when we lived in tribes, you had to expend energy to get calories. At a minimum, you were foraging for berries, but otherwise you probably had to like run something down and kill it, or part of a group hunt, or all kinds of other things. Now you can get calories without expending any. All you have to do is just tap like Uber Eats on your phone or something, and it'll show up at your door, and you can just sit on the couch, which is, of course, like a recipe for poor health, but also just the game has completely changed now. We've transcended a lot of our evolutionary programming and natural situations. And so you need to be careful about designing that to serve you rather than to work against you, because it can very easily nudge you in the other direction. I think there are a few core habits that are going to serve everybody and certainly serve me well. So exercise is a huge one. I don't do it daily, but I train 4 times a week.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I didn't exercise, I don't know that I would be an entrepreneur. Like, I don't know if I could handle the psychological roller coaster without the physical outlet.
Yeah, the release,
You probably feel that as like an athlete too. For being an athlete for so many years, I feel like I need to push myself physically in addition to mentally.
Absolutely.
If it's just mental, it doesn't do it for me. I need to have a physical outlet.
So exercise.
Exercise is one. The ultimate meta habit is reading. Because if you build a habit of reading, you can solve pretty much any other problem. You want to learn how to be a better podcaster, you can read about that. You want to learn how to meditate, you can read about that. You want to learn how to make more money, you can read about that. And so what you need is to develop a habit of reading, and then whatever problem you're facing at the time, you have a method for solving that.
One of my favorite studies is about exercise. And they had 3 cohorts in this study. So they have first cohort, they said, I just want you to track how often you work out over the next few weeks, right? So that's the standard cohort, the control group. Second group, they said, we want you to track how often you exercise, but we're also going to give you a motivational speech presentation, talk about the benefits of heart health, why habits are good for you, and so on. So this is the motivated group, right? The third group, they got the same presentation, so they were equally motivated, and then they did one thing differently. And that one thing was they filled out this sentence. They said, during the next week, I will partake in at least 20 minutes of vigorous exercise on this day, at this time, in this place, right? They specifically stated their intention to implement the behavior. So implementation intention. Here's what happened. First group, 1 out of 3 of them worked out. Second group, motivation did nothing. As soon as they left the researcher's facility the next day, they weren't motivated. It's like reading a book or watching a YouTube or listening to a motivational speaker, and then you forget all about it 20 minutes later. But the third group, the group that had a specific plan for how they were going to implement the behavior, 9 out of 10 of them worked out. So you can increase your odds of success 2 to 3x just by having a specific plan. And this is the insight. Many people think that they lack motivation when what they really lack is clarity. They think that they need to get more motivated, that they need willpower in order to execute on a habit. If I just felt like writing, if I just felt like meditating, if I felt like working out, then I would do it. But in fact, they don't have a plan for it. And so they wake up each day thinking, I wonder if I'll feel motivated to write today. I wonder if I'll feel motivated to work out today. But instead, you can take the decision making out of it by explicitly stating when, where, and how you want to implement the habit. It sounds easy to say, let's just start a plan. Let's write down exactly what you should do, and then maybe you'll follow through on it. But of course, we all know that there are challenges that arise. It's not quite that easy. So here's a little strategy that I like to use to make sure you can come up with a better plan of action. And it's called a failure pre-mortem. So the way that it works is you think about the habit, the project, the goal, whatever the most important thing is that you want to work on. And then I want you to imagine, fast forward 6 months from now, and you failed. And then tell the story of why you failed. What happened? What challenges did you encounter? What was it that took you off course? When I do this with businesses, sometimes we call it the kill the company exercise, because everybody just sits around and thinks about ways to kill the company in the next 6 months. And once you have all that stuff laid out on the table in front of you, you can start to make better choices about how to develop a plan. You can start to have if-then plans. So not only do I want to exercise for 20 minutes on Monday at 5 p.m., but also if I do not exercise because I have to take my kid to practice or whatever, then Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. I will go in, right? You can have ways to adjust for these challenges.
I think we actually have like 3 options for breaking bad habits. So the first option is to reduce exposure. So something like, if you want to stop spending so much money on electronics, then don't follow all the latest tech review blogs. Or if you want to lose weight, don't follow a bunch of food bloggers on Instagram. You're constantly being triggered by that and having to overcome the prompts. Now, that doesn't always work, but if you can cut a habit off at the source, then a lot of the time, like the craving won't arise naturally. So in Atomic Habits in the book, I talk a little bit about this woman who she smoked while she was in college, and she would always smoke while riding horses with a friend. And so eventually at some point she quit smoking, and she's also stopped, like seeing that friend and graduated from college and so on, wasn't riding horses. And then like 10 years later, she got back on a horse for the first time and suddenly craved a cigarette. And she was like, what is going on here? And it's your habits are often tied to a context. They're tied to a situation or some kind of cue. And so if you can reduce exposure to that cue, then in many cases, the craving won't arise. So that's the first option for breaking a bad habit. The second option, which kind of sucks, but is like to sit with the craving long enough to like let this wave of desire ride itself out. And so you basically just resist temptation. It's possible. It's easier if your hand is forced, if you use what I call a commitment device. So, brief story real quick. Victor Hugo, famous author who wrote like Hunchback of Notre Dame and a bunch of other things. Well, when he got the book deal for Hunchback of Notre Dame, he just procrastinated for like a year. He hosted a bunch of house parties, has friends over. He went traveling for a little while.
He was balling.
He like he got the book deal and he did nothing, no work. And eventually his publisher got pissed off. They were like, can you please like actually work on this? And so they set this ultimatum for him. And they said, we're gonna cancel the book in 6 months if you don't have it done by then. And so he got his assistant to come in, put all his clothes into a chest, and they locked him up and took him out of the house. And the only thing he was left with was like this shawl, this like large robe. So basically he had no clothes that were suitable for hosting guests or for leaving the house or like going on trips or anything else. So he more or less put himself on house arrest. And what ended up happening was each time procrastination arose, he was able to kind of sit with that feeling and let it ride because he didn't really have many other options, and then get back to work on the book. And it ended up working. He got the book done like 2 weeks early. But things like that where you can lock in your future action, and it becomes really hard to go to your friend's party or go out to, travel to a different place or whatever, just because you don't have the option. If you can increase the friction, then sometimes you can sit with the craving of a bad habit and let it ride out. So that's your second choice. And then the third choice is the one that you just mentioned, which is you take the solution that the bad habit is providing, the way that it's serving you, and you find a new behavior that delivers that same outcome.
What makes you an expert on habits?
Oh, man.
Based on lots of other people that are talking about habits.
I think that, and I've said this many times before, I'm just going through this with everybody else. I consider my readers my peers in the sense that we're all just trying things out. The only difference is I write about what I learn and share it each week, but we're all just learning along the way. Early on, I had a feeling like that. I was like, who am I to, I'm just a guy. Who am I to write about this? And I had a friend tell me the way you develop expertise is by writing about it every week. So I wrote a new article about habits every Monday and Thursday for 3 years. And that was how I developed the expertise on the topic, was by writing about it.
You did research,
right.
And you said, here's what I found, here's what I tried, here's what worked, what didn't work.
It's a combination of me reading the scientific literature and reading the research and then trying to distill the practical insights from that and testing things out in my own life as a weightlifter, a travel photographer, a writer, an entrepreneur, and seeing what that looks like, and then the two together. And I think you need both. Like, I don't want to be some new age version of an academic who's in an ivory tower just like theorizing about ideas. Is different what it looks like to put ideas into practice, right? Like, imagine you're a peak performance coach and you show up to coach like an NBA team. These guys are like, dude, you need to step on the court if you know what, right, to see what it's actually like.
You don't have to be the victim of your environment. You can also be the architect of it. You can decide to design something to make your good behaviors easier and your bad behaviors harder. So, when it comes to habits, if you want to practice your guitar more frequently, put it right in the middle of your living room so you run across it all the time. If you want to read more, when you make your bed in the morning, take the book you want to read, put it on top of the pillow. When you come back that night, pick it up, read a few pages, go to sleep. For me, I used to buy apples all the time, and then I would put them in the crisper at the bottom of the fridge, and they would sit there for 3 weeks and go bad, and I'd finally open it up and see them again and get mad. And then eventually, I bought a bowl and put it right in the middle of the counter, and so then when I buy apples, I put them there, I see them every day, and now I eat them all the time. Many of our desires are simply shaped because we have an environment that shapes us in that way. So the moral of the story is I've never seen someone stick to positive habits in a consistent fashion in a negative environment. Maybe you can overpower it once or twice, maybe you can have the willpower to do the right thing on one day, but if you're constantly fighting against those forces, it's going to be very hard to follow through. Most people are familiar with the story of the Good Samaritan stopping along the side of the road to help a fallen person, help someone in need. Well, Princeton, their theology school, decided to run this experiment. And they brought in a bunch of theology students. They said, all right, we're all familiar with the story of the Good Samaritan. We're going to break you up into groups, and you're going to go teach in different rooms across campus. You're going to teach this story. And so they started talking about, how they were going to deliver the presentation and so on. And they had a couple different cohorts. The one cohort, they said, all right, just go ahead and, go off and deliver the presentation. So they went off to their rooms. The second one, though, they did something interesting. They sent the group off, but on their way to they sent the group off and they said, by the way, we're running a little bit behind, right? You don't have very long to get there. It takes about 10 minutes. You only got 5, so we kind of need to hurry. You're probably already going to be late. So they're in a rush. They know they're going to go give this presentation. On the way, they planted an actor on the campus. And this actor is laying on the ground, hurt, moaning in pain. And so they scream twice, and then they cry out. And every single group went right past the person in need to go give a presentation about helping a person in need. Right? The one person even stepped over the guy who was in pain in order to get there. Now, the point of this, and what I'd like to start talking about now, is the danger of being goal-focused and goal-oriented. These people had a goal, right, to deliver a presentation. And they were so one-sided, so narrow-minded, so focused on that goal that they missed the bigger picture and the perspective of what they should have been doing in the first place. And I think that this can be a danger of goals often. And so instead, I would like to encourage us to focus on systems rather than goals. Here are some examples. If you're a coach, your goal is to win a championship, but your system is what your team does at practice each day. If you're a writer, your goal might be to write a book, maybe even write a best-selling book, but your system is how you write each week, the schedule that you follow. If you're an entrepreneur, your goal could be to build $1 million business or a $10 million business, but the system is the sales and marketing process that you have. The systems are what actually make the difference. They're what drive the results. And what I've seen, having goals is great. Having a vision, having a dream is nice. It's important to know where you're going and where you're headed. It's important to have some clarity of focus, to know that we're moving in this direction. But once you know that, having the goal on paper makes very little difference. And committing to the system and showing up every day drives a lot of results.
Often when we set about to change something or to achieve something, the first step is almost always setting a goal. And this is coming from someone like I was very goal-oriented for a long time, right? Like I would set goals for the things I wanted to do in sports, the goals for the grades I wanted in class, the goals for how much money I wanted to make in my business. And sometimes I would achieve those, but then sometimes I wouldn't. And so I had this question like, well, clearly I'm setting goals for both, so like that can't be the thing that determines it. And you see this a lot, that the winners and losers in a particular domain often have the same goals. Like every Olympian wants to win a gold medal.
Sure.
Every job candidate wants to get the job. So if the winners and the losers have the same goal, then the goal cannot be the thing that distinguishes the two. And the thing that distinguishes them is the process, the system behind the goal. And this is also important because achieving a goal often only changes your life for the moment. So like, say you're, just take like a simple example. Say you have a messy room, and you get motivated and you set the goal to clean your room. Well, you can do that in an hour and then you have a clean room. But if you don't change the sloppy habits that led to a messy room in the first place, then you just end up with a dirty room again.
Yeah.
So it's like treating a symptom without treating the cause. And habits are a better solution in that case, because if you fix the inputs, the outputs fix themselves automatically, right? You don't have to fight to have a clean room if you have clean habits. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's true in a larger sense as well, right? Yeah. People want outcomes. They want to earn more money or lose weight or be more productive or reduce stress. But the outcome is not the thing that needs to change. It's the system that precedes it.
I remember thinking the same thing. I played baseball all the way through college, and like many sports, we had this kind of like hell week in the beginning where, training, conditioning, and everything before the season starts. And I remember doing that in the morning. It started at like 6 a.m. and then, we got done and I was in class at like, 9 or something. And we had a test and everybody was freaking out. And I was like, this is so stupid to be worried about this. What I just did to my body 2 hours ago or 3 hours ago was so much harder than whatever this quiz is going to be. It just helps like recalibrate your mind a little bit. I think that's one reason. I've spent the last couple of years writing about habits and thinking about the stuff, researching the science, and like really working mentally difficultly. But what I've noticed is that I need the physical outlet too, because I don't think that if you only push yourself mentally, I don't think you get the full effect. I think you need both. And there's something about pushing yourself physically that
strengthens yourself mentally and also helps you just keep perspective and recalibrate on all the other stuff that you face in life. It helps you put things in their proper place. You realize that, most of the things you're worried about are not actually that big of a deal.
About 15 years ago, early 2000s, British Cycling hires this guy named Dave Brailsford. And at that point, for the last 100 years, British Cycling had been incredibly mediocre. They had won a single gold medal back in 1908. They had never won a Tour de France, which is the premium race in cycling, the premier race. And so they hired this guy named Dave Brailsford to change that. And in fact, at the time, they were so mediocre that when they went to buy a new set of bikes, they were going to get like 200 from a top manufacturer in Europe. They actually weren't even given quotes from the manufacturer because they didn't want other teams to see the British riders using their gear for fear that it would hurt sales. And so they brought Brailsford in, and they said, "What's your plan for changing this?" And he said, "Well, I believe in this philosophy that I call the aggregation of marginal gains." The way that he described it is the 1% improvement in nearly everything that you do. So they started with a bunch of things that you would expect a cycling team to start with. So for example, they put slightly lighter tires on the bike. They got a more ergonomic seat for the riders to sit on. They had their outdoor riders wear indoor racing suits because they were lighter and more aerodynamic. They had each rider wear a biofeedback sensor so they could see how they would respond to training and then adjust it appropriately for the person. But then they did a bunch of things you wouldn't expect a cycling team to do. So they split tested different types of massage gels to see which one led to the best type of muscle recovery. They taught each rider how to wash their hands to reduce the risk of infections so they wouldn't get a cold after, and get sick. They also figured out the type of pillow that led to the best night's sleep for each rider and then brought that on the road with them to hotels whenever they were competing. And Brailsford said, if we can actually do this, right, if we can execute on all these little 1% improvements, then I think we can win a Tour de France within 5 years. He ended up being wrong. They won it in 2 years, and then they repeated again the third year with a different rider. And then after a 1 year break, they won 2 more. So they've won 4 out of the last 5 now, have gone to British cyclists. But it was at the Olympics in London in 2012 when this kind of strategy really came to fruition. They won 70% of the gold medals available. And so this idea that small improvements, tiny habits, little choices are not just a cherry on top of our performance, not just like a nice thing to have, but actually can be the key that unlocks significant success. That's an idea that I want us to carry with us as we go through the rest of this presentation. And one way to think about it is just kind of basic math. Like if you just look at the numbers, if you were able to improve by 1% each day for an entire year, and those gains compound, you would end up 37 times better at the end of the year. And if you were to get 1% worse, you would whittle yourself almost all the way down to 0. And what's interesting here is that everybody wants a transformation, right? Everybody wants a radical improvement, we want rapid success. But we fail to realize that small habits and little choices are transforming us every day already. That these times when you make a choice that is slightly better, slightly worse, a little mistake or a small error, 1% better or 1% worse, that these things compound over time. And habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. And so if you can learn to master those, then you can make time work for you rather than get against you, right? Good habits make time your ally. Bad habits make time your enemy.
People have heard things like this before. Start small steps, whatever. But even when you know you should start small, it's still really easy to start too big. Mm-hmm. So, say you want to get in shape and you're like, all right, I want to run a couple days a week, but I know I should start small, so I'll only run for 15 minutes. But even that is like way bigger than what I'm talking about. I mean, it should be so small that in the book I call it the 2-minute rule, but you should downscale any habit to fit within 2 minutes. So it's like, all right, I want to go for a run 3 days a week. My habit is I put on my running shoes and I step out the door. Anything else that happens after that is just bonus.
Is a success.
Now, sometimes people resist that because they're like, well, this sounds kind of like a mental trick, right? Like I know the real goal isn't just to put my shoes on. I know the real goal is to go for a run. So if you feel that way, my suggestion would be only do the first 2 minutes for the first few weeks. Because what you need to do is master the art of showing up. Like I had a reader who ended up losing over 100 pounds. And one of the things that he did was he went to the gym, but he wasn't allowed to stay for longer than 5 minutes. So he would show up, be there, do like half an exercise, 5 minutes would go, he'd leave. He did this for like 6 weeks.
Wow.
Now, it sounds ridiculous. It sounds silly because it's the opposite.
Just work out for a half hour.
Yeah. But what he was doing was mastering the art of showing up. And a habit must be established before it can be improved. right? If you don't establish the habit, there's nothing to optimize. If you're not showing up at the gym every day, you don't even, who cares about what workout you're doing? You're not even there.
Don't start running an hour a day if you've never run in a long time.
Be the person who shows up and puts their running shoes on every day before you worry about how far you're running and what kind of workout you're doing and all that type of stuff. There's this thing called Goodhart's Law that says a measure ceases to be a good measure when it becomes the target. And so the point is, like, imagine you're trying to lose weight. If you use the scale as a measurement, as a data point, then yeah, it can be useful as like one signal into your overall health. But if it becomes the target, if the whole mission of getting in shape becomes about making the scale go lower, well, then you start doing a lot of unhealthy things just to get the scale to move. You may do some crazy juice cleanse or some kind of radical diet, or you end up doing unhealthy things in the name of moving the number. And I think that there's a lot of application of that in creativity and business as well. If the number becomes the target, then you kind of lose sight of the bigger picture. And so I feel like I try to remind myself that measurements are just a piece of the larger puzzle, and I can use them to inform and make sure I'm moving in the right direction, but don't spend too much time obsessing over any individual metric. Why is something rewarding? Why do you find it rewarding? And one of the reasons is because it satisfies the craving that preceded the action. So, one way to put this is that perceived value motivates you to act. Actual value motivates you to repeat. So when you buy something on Amazon, you don't actually buy the product. Like you don't buy the book because you don't actually have it yet. What you buy is the image the product creates in your mind. Mm-hmm. You buy your expectation or the perceived value of the sales page. It's only after you get the book and you read it and you're like, oh, this is really good. That's when the actual value, it satisfies that craving you had before, and it reinforces, oh, hey, this was enjoyable. I should do it again next time. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have both of those on each side of the behavior. Social norms. Society leans heavily on us all. So there are just broad examples of this.
Family pressure, religious pressure, media pressure,
all kinds of stuff.
Peer pressure, everything.
Yes. Yeah. Let's say, so just some broad examples. You walk into an elevator and you turn around to face the front. You have a job interview and you wear a suit and tie or a dress or something nice. There's no reason it has to be that way, right? Like you could face the back of the elevator, you could wear a swimsuit to a job interview, but you don't do that because it violates the shared norms of the group, right? It violates the shared expectations of what that society has. But that's true not only in a broad sense that we're part of these tribes, like big tribes, what it means to be a Christian or to be American or to be Australian or whatever, but it's also true in the small tribes that we belong to, what it means to be a neighbor on this street or a member of your local CrossFit gym or to volunteer for a local organization. All of those tribes, all of those groups that you belong to have a set of shared expectations, a set of shared norms. And the key, if you want to build habits that last, if you want to change the way that you interpret cues, is to join a group where the desired behavior is the normal behavior, right? Like there are plenty of people who they want to work out, but going to the gym feels like a lot to them. It feels hard, feels like a sacrifice. But there are also people who go to the gym every week and it's just normal. It doesn't feel like an obligation. That's the desired behavior is the normal behavior.
It's their lifestyle.
Right. Same thing for musicians. Like if you want to learn an instrument, hang out with people who play all the time. Like if you hang out with a bunch of musicians, it's like, well, yeah,
that's what we do all day.
We play 4 days a week. We play 7 days a week because it just happens. That's what the tribe does. The caveat to this, and the thing that I don't see people mention a lot, is that the reason social norms influence our behavior so much is because we want to belong to the tribe. We want to be friends with those people. And so we don't want to lose the friendship or lose belonging over violating the norms.
Yeah, you're not going to hang out with a bunch of vegans and have pork.
Right.
And just like be the only one eating that.
You won't hang out with them for very long because you're not going to be friends with them anymore.
Exactly.
Right? They'll kick you out.
So you want to rise to the standard of that group, of that community.
So the key, I think, is to join a group where your desired behavior is a normal behavior and you already have something else in common with that group. So Steve Cam is a good example of this. So like Steve runs Nerd Fitness, right? And all these people want to get in shape who are coming into his community, but they also love Star Wars or Batman or Spider-Man or all these other things that nerds are into. And if you show up, it can be intimidating to want to get in shape or work out the first time. But if you can connect with the group over your mutual love of Star Wars, then you're like, oh, well, I'm friends with these people, and now I also want to pick up those other habits with them because I want to belong with the group because we're already friends. And so I think you can apply that methodology to most new tribes that you join. Don't just join a new tribe because they have the desired behavior. Also try to find a way that you can overlap with them. Find some shared context.
Some other stuff too, yeah.
That you can bond over, and then it's easier to adopt the habits.
Musicians that like to be healthy.
Yeah, right.
If you want to do both, right? It's
Sure.
like finding that even subgroup.
It's like, hey, we love playing music, and then also you're going to start eating better because we all want to eat healthy.
Exactly, yeah.
This is coming from someone who's been very goal-oriented for a long time. So I would set goals for the grades I wanted to get in school, or the weights I wanted to lift in the gym, or the amount of revenue I wanted in my business, or how many email subscribers I wanted, like all of that. And at some point I realized, I'm setting all these goals, like am I actually achieving some of them? And sometimes I would, but there were plenty of times where I failed. And so I had this realization that, well, if that's the case, then setting a goal cannot be the thing that means whether or not I achieve success. And if you think about this, the winners and losers in any domain, a lot of the time they have the same goals. Like every person who applies for a job has the goal of getting the job. Every Olympian has the goal of winning the gold medal. And so if winners and losers have the same goals, then the goal can't be the thing that makes the difference. And I don't mean that goals are useless. I think goals are actually quite useful for setting a sense of direction, or knowing, what area the boat should be pointed in, what direction the boat should be pointed in, and where you're trying to row. But once you've decided that, it's probably more useful to put the goal on the shelf and focus exclusively on the system or the process. And in my language, habits make up the system. And they're like this collection of behaviors and patterns that you perform each day. And when you put them all together, you end up with this system that delivers a result. And whatever your results are in life or in business or wherever, your current system is perfectly designed to deliver them. It has to be, by definition. That's why you're getting those results. So if you want different results, what you need is not really a different goal. What you need is a different system. This is one of the most common, criticisms or complaints that people ask me about with habits is like, well, I don't want to be robotic, right? Like, what about like spontaneity? What about the, freedom and doing what I want? I don't want to like pigeonhole myself in this lifestyle. But it's this false dichotomy, because habits don't restrict freedom, they create it. It's often the people who have the worst habits that have the least amount of freedom. It's the people who have terrible financial habits that are always wondering like where the next dollar will come from. Or it's the people who have poor learning habits that are always feeling like they're behind the curve. Or people who have poor fitness habits that are always struggling to find energy. But on the other hand, if you have your habits dialed in, if you have your fitness habits figured out, if you've got your finances handled, then you actually have way more freedom than you did before. Now you actually have the space you have the energy to do what you want. You have the strength to do what you want. You have the financial ability to spend time in areas that you want. And all of that comes from getting your habits handled. So it is a little counterintuitive, this idea that like discipline equals freedom, or habits do not restrict freedom, they create it. But it's true that if you can handle that stuff, if the fundamentals of life are dialed in, then you've got space for spontaneity and creativity and freedom and all the other stuff. In a sense, you could say that every behavior is driven by the desire for a change in state. And so when you smoke a cigarette or eat a bag of Doritos or pick up your phone, what you really want is not the nicotine or the calories from the Doritos or the likes on social media. What you want is to feel less anxious, or to feel approved, or to not be bored anymore. So it's really the desire to change that state that you're in that motivates you to act. And the behavior, and in many cases, a lot of our modern technology is an example of this. We didn't evolve. You didn't come out of the womb with like a desire to check Instagram, right? There's nothing evolutionarily wired there. It's just a modern manifestation of an ancient desire to gain respect and approval, or to not be abandoned by the tribe, or to feel approved in some capacity. And so we kind of have those like deeper primal drives. And then the secondary layer on top of it is just the modern manifestation of that behavior and how we're resolving it in the moment. The first stage of every habit is a cue. The second stage is a craving, or some kind of prediction that your brain makes. I'll give you an example of these in a second. The third stage is the response, and then the fourth stage is the reward. So you walk into the question I had that no model I could find could solve in any good way or explain in any good way was, why can the same person respond to the same cue in a different way? So let's say you get into the habit of going to the gym at 5 o'clock every day. But then sometimes work gets busy and you don't go to the gym at 5 o'clock. Current models don't explain that very well because it's like, well, the cue is 5. You should be going to the gym right now. It says the routine follows automatically after the cue. Or why does someone walk into the kitchen and see a plate of cookies and then they automatically want to eat it? But you could just as easily imagine that you just got done eating dinner in the other room and you're stuffed and you're full and you walk in and you see a plate of cookies and you're like, I'm stuffed, I don't want to eat anything. So what's going on there? And I think these 4 stages explain it, which is you see the cue or you experience a cue, and then your craving or your prediction differs based on your current state. So the way that you interpret the cues in your life is contingent upon the current state that you're in.
The way you're feeling.
Right. And also other things like your beliefs or your identity, the social group that you're part of, right? So like if you're in a different group, then maybe you interpret things in a different way. You could imagine one group, they practice a particular religion, they walk into a butcher shop and see pork and they're like, oh, we can't eat that.
Right.
Another person walks in and they're like, oh yeah, I'll have a pork sandwich because it's obvious and easy and right there. So what you choose is contingent upon how you interpret the cues in your life. It's this idea between the system and the goal. And, like say you're playing a sport. In every sport, the goal is to have the best score on the scoreboard at the end of the game. But it would be ridiculous to spend all game looking at the scoreboard because it wouldn't help you in any way. So in fact, if you just ignored the score the entire time and just focused on a better process or playing a better way or a better scheme or strategy, then you probably would end up with the best score. I think Bill Walsh, he was the Super Bowl winning head coach for the San Francisco 49ers. He had this quote, it was like, the score takes care of itself. And that I think that probably applies to a lot of tracking and measurement. There are a couple ways to think about it, but I would say just quick definition. A habit is a behavior that has been repeated enough times to be performed more or less automatically. So you can do it pretty much on autopilot. But another way to think about it, and I think this is a useful way to define a habit, is that as you go through life, you face different problems. And some of those problems are big and some of them are small, like you need to tie your shoes. And whenever you face a problem, your brain starts looking for solutions to that. And as you come across solutions to the recurring problems in life, you start to automate those. And so every morning you wake up and you put your shoes on and you got this little problem that you need to solve. And pretty soon, after you tie your shoes 100 times or 500 times or 1,000 times, you can do it pretty much without thinking. And so that's another way of thinking about habits, is that they're kind of these like automatic solutions we fall into for whatever the recurring problems are we face.
Right. Behavior that becomes habituated.
Yeah. And, the interesting thing about this is you don't necessarily have to have the same habit to solve a recurring problem. Like if you come home from work each day and you feel stressed and exhausted, one person might play video games for an hour, and that's a way to resolve that problem. So they get in the habit of doing it, and they just walk over to the controller. They don't even think about it. Another person might go for a run for 20 minutes or meditate for 10 minutes. A third person might smoke a cigarette. And all of those are just solutions to that problem that you're facing. And that, I think, is another powerful lesson, is that your original habit is not necessarily the optimal one. And once you realize that, then it kind of becomes your responsibility to become a little more aware of what those habits are and then think about, can you shape them or design them?
Right.
So in a sense, habits are the path through which you can reshape your self-image. Because if you, and this is one reason why I believe in small habits, if you say you have a really crazy day at work and you don't have time to do a full workout, well, doing 5 push-ups, it's easy to dismiss that and be like, well, that's not going to do anything. It doesn't get me in shape. But if you do 5 push-ups, then you cast a vote for the identity of, I'm the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. Even if it wasn't ideal, even if I didn't have much time, even if the best I could do after this 12-hour flight was to do 5 push-ups and then crash in the hotel bed, I still didn't miss a workout. And the cumulative effect of that, of reinforcing your desired identity, I think is really big in the long run. And if it's meaningful, then it actually is big, even if the action is small. And so that's one reason I believe in small habits, is that they are the pathway through which you can reshape your self-image. And that, I think, is the real reason habits matter. It's true, they can habits can help you get in shape or be more productive or reduce stress or make more money. And all those external results are great. But the real thing that they do is they reinforce and embody the identity of the type of person that you want to be.
If you want 10 more amazing rules from James Clear, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
One of the phrases I'd like to use is that pretty much any of the results in your life are a lagging measure of your habits. Your brain is always developing habits. So it's happening whether you want it to happen or not. And the question is, can you take control of the process?